Now that you've walked the streets and breathed the air of a medieval city, imagine something different, stirring beneath that slow routine. Not a riot, not fire or fury, but a rising disquiet. A long-held breath, slowly being exhaled. This is the story of a man called Wat Tyler, a name passed down through the centuries, often with more silence than sound. He did not begin life with ambition, nor with a title. He was a thatcher by trade, someone who repaired roofs with reeds and straw, a humble profession like so many others. His hands were his livelihood, his tools were simple. And yet one day he found himself at the head of a rebellion that nearly toppled the throne. To understand how such a man could rise at all, we must first return to the stillness before the storm, to the rhythm of 14th century England. It is the year 1381. The country has just endured wave after wave of plague. Entire villages have disappeared. Fields lie untended. The labor force has dwindled. And yet taxes rise. The government, in desperate need of money for its wars, imposes a poll tax, a flat fee paid by every person, regardless of wealth. 3 times in 4 years, it is levied, and this time, it breaks something. In Kent and Essex, the air begins to hum with quiet frustration. Not riots, not marches, just conversations in taverns, in fields, in churchyards. Questions whispered, why must we pay when we have nothing left to give? Why do the lords live in ease while we eat barley and sleep in dirt? In this atmosphere, Wat Tyler becomes a name known beyond his village. He is not a nobleman, and he does not carry a sword, but he speaks plainly, calmly. His voice is measured. His anger is real, but not loud. And that is why people listen. The revolt begins with refusals. Tax collectors turned away, documents burned, but quickly the movement grows. Peasants walk in long, quiet lines toward London, carrying sticks and scythes. No armor, no horses, just purpose. Wat Tyler emerges as their spokesman, not shouting, but negotiating. When the rebels reach the city, they enter almost peacefully. The gates are not held against them. The people inside, many of them sympathetic, do not resist. The rebels meet the king, a boy of just 14, who agrees to their demands in the moment. For a time, it seems as though change might come through reason, not force. But power is fragile. Promises made in fear do not always hold. On June 15, 1381, Wat Tyler meets with the king at Smithfield. It is meant to be a final negotiation. He speaks. He lays out a vision for fairness, for freedom from serfdom. But in the tense moments that follow, something changes. Perhaps it is a misunderstanding. Perhaps it is fear. A sword is drawn not by Tyler, but by one of the king's men. Wat Tyler is struck down. Quietly, quickly. There is no great battle, no war. Just silence and retreat. The revolt dies almost instantly with him. The promises are broken. The lords restore order, and history moves on. But the memory lingers, not of violence, but of possibility, of what it looked like when ordinary people, for just a moment, believed that the weight of centuries could be lifted, not with fire, but with words. Tonight, Wat Tyler remains a gentle footnote in history, not because he failed, but because he tried without shouting. And because in a world ruled by titles and noise, his quiet rebellion was something rare. Now let us pause. Not to look, but to listen. Imagine standing still in the middle of a medieval town, your eyes gently closed. There is no traffic, no hum of electric wires, no phones, no music carried on radio waves. And yet, the air is anything but silent. The Middle Ages had a sound all its own, a world shaped not just by sights and smells, but by a daily rhythm composed in bells, footsteps, and the muffled murmur of voices. Much of that soundscape has been forgotten, but some of it, if you listen closely, can still be heard in the records, in the ruins and the rhythms of that vanished world. Burst the bells. The bell tower was the timekeeper of the medieval town, not merely a symbol of the church, but the very structure that told people when to wake, when to work, when to pray, and when to rest. Bells rang out at regular hours. Matins in the early dark, lauds as dawn crept in. Prime with the sunrise, then terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. each bell echoing across rooftops and courtyards, marking the day into pieces. The sound was deep and resonant, not shrill, and often heard by all at once. It did not chime alone, but layered gently over the background noise of daily life. And what was that background? If it is morning, you might hear the soft crunch of straw being swept from doorsteps, or the rhythmic thump of laundry beaten against stones in a stream. Horses clop on cobblestones, sometimes pulling carts with wheels that creak in steady, worn rhythm. Chickens cluck in enclosed yards, dogs bark distantly, pigeons flutter from rooftops. The vendor calls out slowly, repeating the same words all day long. Fresh fish, ripe pears, sweet bread. From inside homes, you might hear the grinding of grain between handstones, a low, repetitive scrape that builds muscle over years. In workshops, the gentle tap of hammer against leather or the rasp of a file shaping wood. Blacksmiths beat metal in intervals, not as thunder, but in patient, tempered strikes. Children shout and chase one another across the square, their voices high and unstructured. But even this sound is brief, constrained by discipline and space. Play was a luxury squeezed between chores. At midday, a lull, a brief hush as people retreat inside to eat. Just soft murmurs, clinking bowls, perhaps a flute played idly by an apprentice. No orchestra, no choruses, it's just the solitary music of individual hands. Then, as evening falls, the sounds soften again. The fire crackles gently in hearths. You hear the snap of kindling, the slow bubbling of stew in a clay pot. The street vendors' cries grow hoarse, then fade entirely. Gates are closed, locks clunk softly, doors are barred. And always there are voices, but not many shouting. Instead, you hear the low hum of Latin in a church, the sing-song lilt of a prayer murmured aloud. The rhythm of conversation held in alleyways and under archways, secrets passed in quiet, songs sung in low tones, instructions whispered from mother to child. There were no headphones, no walls thick enough to mute the neighbors. Sound moved freely, and with it, information. Gossip, warnings, prayers, trades, all carried by tone and rhythm more than volume. Some sounds, too, marked darker hours. The dragging chain of a prisoner, slow tolling of a funeral bell, a single long note that told the whole town someone had passed. Or in the rare case of alarm, the fast, panicked clanging of every bell in town, a cacophony that silenced everything else. But those sounds were rare. Most days were filled not with chaos or clamor, but with the soft, layered harmony of human effort. Work, prayer, survival, and now, centuries later, that soundscape is lost. But if you close your eyes, you can almost hear it again. The slow, repetitive thump of a wooden ladle, the echo of footsteps on stone, the steady chime of a distant bell folding the hours of another quiet day. Whenever you're ready, just type "continue" to begin the final segment. The Merchant's Wife and the Rules of Respectability. A look at the contrasting daily life of those who lived just a few steps higher in the city's quiet hierarchy. Imagine now that you live just a few doors down from the crowded tenements and narrow alleys we visited earlier. Your street is still paved in stone, your neighbors still close, but your windows have shutters of smooth wood. Your doorway is framed in carved lintels. Behind that door, life follows a different rhythm. You are the wife of a merchant. Not nobility, not royalty, but part of the growing urban class that sits quietly between peasant and lord. Your household deals in fabric or spices or finely crafted leather goods. You have help? Perhaps a young maid from the countryside who fetches water and minds the children. You have candles, beeswax, not just tallow. And your meals, though simple, arrive with regularity. Yet with this rise in comfort comes something less visible. The quiet pressure of respectability. Your mornings begin with careful dressing. Your linen is clean because you have the time and resources to wash it. Your outer garments are trimmed in fur or embroidery, but not too much. You must not be mistaken for someone trying to impersonate a lady of rank. Sumptuary laws are strict. You know what you're allowed to wear? And what would be considered presumptuous? Breakfast is modest. Oatcakes, cheese, perhaps fruit, eaten at a wooden table, smoothed by years of use. The children are taught manners, not just obedience. Their futures rely on good impressions as much as good behavior. Your husband leaves for his shop or the guild hall. You stay behind, not idle, but managing the household. You oversee the accounts, the storage, the help. You manage social ties with other wives. Slowly, carefully, with soft words and subtle gestures. In this world, a glance lasts too long, a laugh rings too loud, and a misplaced phrase can follow you for months. Reputation is your armor. Modesty is your weapon. You walk to market later in the morning, not alone. That would raise eyebrows. You walk with another woman or with a servant. You hold your head high but never haughty. You smile politely, but you do not gossip too freely. Everything is balanced. Everything measured. Your shoes are leather, dyed and well-maintained. They make a soft tap on the stone, more refined than the clatter of clogs, but less ostentatious than a noble's heels. You pass beggars and offer a coin. Never too little, never too much. In the afternoon, you may help in the shop, especially if it's part of your family's home. You weigh goods on scales that must remain honest. You greet customers with warmth, but not familiarity. In your world, appearances matter more than words. Cleanliness, order, restraint. As evening falls, you sit by the hearth with your children. You tell stories, not fairy tales, but family tales, of how the shop began, of how your husband learned his trade, of the time you weathered a harsh winter with nothing but dried lentils and determination. You embroider as you speak, small patient stitches. A sampler for your daughter's dowry, a cloth for the church. Each piece a quiet testament to your usefulness, your virtue, your unspoken labor. At night, your bed is a wooden frame with a proper mattress stuffed with straw and wool. A canopy hangs above, not for beauty, but to keep out drafts. The room is warmer than most, but still cool in winter. You lie beside your husband in silence, your day folding into memory. Will be much the same, and that is its own comfort. In a world where the lower classes struggled to survive, and the nobles played dangerous games of power, you occupy the middle. Not safe, but steady. Your life is a pattern, a structure, a discipline. And within that quiet structure, you find purpose. Not excitement, not fame, but a sense of order. The steady rhythm of keeping things in place. And now, as the candles dim and the streets grow still, we leave the medieval city behind. It was not a place of peace, not always, nor of plenty. It was a world of labor and layering, of rituals and rules, of aching feet and watchful eyes. A world where you rose before the sun, swept the hearth, whispered prayers beneath your breath, and found meaning in repetition. You've walked the muddy alleys where the cobbler's child chases a rolling hoop, sat beside a merchant's wife as she stitched her quiet pride into linen. You've listened to the murmurs of discontent rise into revolt, and heard the soft hum of a city waking, living, and sleeping, all without ever truly being still. History and truth is not made only in castles or battlefields. It lives in the worn soles of boots, in the soot-streaked faces of bakers, in the steady hands of scribes who copy a single passage for hours. It lives in the unrecorded rhythm of lives lived long ago, not loudly, but persistently. The past was never silent, yet it has become so. Its voices, once shouted, now reach us only as echoes, softened by time, worn smooth by centuries of forgetting. But if you sit quietly, if you listen patiently, you can still hear them. In the creak of a wooden cart, in the hush of a chapel's air, in the whisper of wind through thatched eaves. Tonight, you're safe. Far from chamber pots and crowded stalls, from flickering torches and the press of unwashed crowds, you lie still while the world outside sleeps. Let the bells toll in the distance. Let the dust settle on the parchment, and let the stories of old wrap around you like a soft wool cloak, frayed, forgotten by many, but enduring. Tomorrow will come, but for now rest. Sleep well, traveler. Tonight, we drift back through the fog of deep time, far beyond kings and conquests, beyond writing and empires, to a world where life was smaller, quieter, and far more difficult. You find yourself in a clearing. The forest is heavy and green. Smoke rises softly from a thatched roof nearby. There's no electricity, no clocks, no writing, only the rhythm of the seasons. The feel of your hands against stone and grain, the hush of ancient wind. This is not the past of famous names. It is the past of ordinary lives, lived close to the earth. The Neolithic, a time of stone, fire, and slow transformation. In this episode, we'll begin by spending a long, cold day in a prehistoric village, where every meal must be earned by aching effort. Then we follow the final journey of a man who died 5,000 years ago and was preserved in the ice. After that, we'll wander among stone circles and silent tombs, tracing forgotten rituals carved in earth and sky. And finally, we'll explore the beginnings of status and inequality. When grain made kings and the first chiefs were buried beneath monuments of stone, so settle in, let your breath slow. Imagine the warmth of a fire, the smell of smoke and damp earth, and the distant call of birds just before dusk. And let us begin. Imagine waking not to an alarm, but to the flickering gray of dawn filtering through smoke-stained thatch. The fire banked low through the night has nearly gone out. You feel the chill of the morning air before you feel your own breath. It's cold enough that it fogs in front of your face. There are no metal tools, no ceramic mugs, no breakfast ready on a counter. Only the quiet responsibility to get up, stoke the fire, and begin again. You are part of a small community, perhaps 20 or 30 people. Your world is centered around a cluster of roundhouses made of wood, mud, and straw. The roofs leak slightly when it rains. The floors are packed earth, and the air inside smells faintly of ash, smoke, and old grain. Your first task is to grind cereal, barley, or emmer wheat, with a large flat stone and a handheld quern. You kneel on the hard ground, hunched over, and push the heavy stone in a circular motion again and again. The grain must be ground fine enough to mix into a simple porridge. Rough, chewy, but nourishing. Your knees ache, your shoulders burn. This task will take hours. Outside, others have risen. Few are tending the animals, sheep and goats, perhaps pigs. The herds are small, wary, and prone to wander. Their dung mixes with the mud around the village paths. There's no pavement, no drainage, just straw-strewn paths, thick with the scent of livestock and wet soil. Children help in quiet, unsupervised ways, fetching water from a nearby stream with clay pots, gathering firewood, or scattering seed in cleared patches of soil. Play and labor blur together. There are no toys, but there are stories. Pass from mouth to ear, shaped by firelight and repetition. Later, you'll need to shape tools. Your flint knife, chipped by hand from stone, has dulled. Sharpening it means finding the right kind of rock, striking carefully with antler or bone, and hoping it doesn't fracture wrong. Every tool you use is made by hand. Nothing is bought. Nothing is thrown away without thought. The weather is always present. Wind finds its way through the walls. Rain turns everything slick and miserable. Summer brings biting insects. Winter brings hunger. Meals are simple. Bread made from coarsely ground flour, cooked on a stone over the fire, bit of salted meat, if any is left, perhaps a stew of roots and herbs, whatever you could gather or grow. There are no spices, no sugar, no indulgences. At night, everyone gathers inside the largest house. The fire crackles low. Elders might tell stories. Not myths in the sense we know them now, but fragments of memory, survival, and warning. A tale about the hard winter when the river froze. A reminder to store more nuts this year. A hint of reverence for the stars. You sleep on straw, wrapped in furs or woven wool. There are no mattresses. It's no light once the fire dies. Just the creak of the roof, the shift of animals outside, and the deep breathing silence of a world before cities. Life in a Neolithic village is neither brutal nor idyllic. It is slow, repetitive, inescapably physical. The rhythm of your day is set by needs, not choices. And while there is community, there is also constant labor, constant survival, and a nearness to the natural world that is both comforting and cruel. This is the world before history, a world of flint and fire. High in the Etzel Alps, near the border of modern Austria and Italy, a man once walked alone across the cold mountain pass. He would not return. For more than 5,000 years, he lay undisturbed. Preserved in ice, his body slowly mummified by the silence of snow, wind, and time. He was discovered in 1991 by hikers, almost by accident. At first, they thought he was a modern climber, TC, as he came to be called, was far older. And through him we glimpse a life otherwise lost. A single human being frozen between survival and extinction. Tonight we walk beside him. It is early autumn, around 3300 BCE. The sky is overcast. There is a damp chill in the air. The man is about 45 years old, older than many in his world. His hair is dark, trimmed. His beard is short. He is lean, with the wiry strength of someone who has walked countless miles and worked every day of his life. His clothes are simple but clever. A grass cape to shed rain, coat and leggings made of stitched animal hides, woven shoes stuffed with grass for insulation, carries a copper axe, its head shiny and valuable, bound to a wooden haft. His bow is not yet finished. His quiver holds arrows, some fletched, some not. We don't know exactly why he's climbing the pass that day, but we can imagine. He may have been fleeing or hunting, or making his way toward a known route across the mountains. Perhaps he was performing a ritual. Perhaps he was simply lost. What we do know is that he was wounded. He bore cuts on his hands, bruises, and most notably, an arrow lodged in his left shoulder. It had pierced a vital artery. He likely bled to death within minutes. His final meal, discovered in his stomach, was a fatty stew, possibly ibex meat, eaten not long before he died. There were traces of einkorn wheat, herbs, and charcoal, suggesting it had been cooked over an open fire. He had tattoos, made by pricking the skin and rubbing in charcoal. Not decorative, but aligned with joints and pressure points. Perhaps they were therapeutic, like acupuncture. Perhaps spiritual, we don't know. But they hint at a body both injured and tended. His gear was practical, a backpack frame, a knife, mushroom caps, not for eating, but likely used as medicine or tinder. Fragments of birch bark, a fire starter kit with flint and pyrite. Everything had a purpose. And yet, despite his tools, his clothes, his experience, he died alone, cold, and exposed. When his body was discovered millennia later, he was so well preserved that scientists could examine not only his bones and stomach contents, but even the pollen trapped in his clothing. From this, they reconstructed his last days, the altitude he traveled, the kinds of plants he passed, the order of his meals. But for all we know, many things remain a mystery. Was he murdered by enemies? Or ambushed by a rival? Is the copper axe a sign of wealth or status? Was he a wanderer? Or a chief? His story is a bridge between archaeology and humanity. He was not a myth. He was not a king. He was a man walking across a mountain, carrying everything he needed, with danger behind him and uncertain ground ahead. And in those last hours, whether he sensed his fate or hoped for a horizon he would never reach, we can only guess. The snow fell. The wind whispered over the rocks. And time, slow and indifferent, folded itself around him. Cece's remains now rest in a controlled environment, studied and preserved. But his final walk, his last meal, last injury, last breath, offer us something rare. A single thread in the vast unwritten fabric of prehistory. A glimpse not of gods or battles, but of one man, alone on a cold path 5,000 years ago. And as you imagine his quiet steps across the stones, let your breath settle once more. The world he walked in was vast, empty, and deeply silent. Imagine the chill of early morning on the open plain. It clings low to the ground. The grasses whisper in a faint breeze. And ahead of you, standing alone and unmoving, are the stones. Massive slabs of weathered rock, silent, upright, arranged with purpose, though no one can say exactly why. Stone circles are among the most haunting remnants of prehistory. Structures built not for shelter, not for defense, but for something else. Something deeper. A purpose lost to time. Tonight we step among them, quietly, carefully, and curiously. The best known is Stonehenge in southern England. But it is not the only one. Across the British Isles, northern France, and beyond, there are hundreds of stone circles, megalithic monuments, standing stones, and burial mounds. Some are solitary stones leaning toward the horizon like forgotten sentinels. Others are vast complexes of monoliths arranged with uncanny precision. These structures date back to the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age. Roughly between 3000 and 1500 BCE, they predate the pyramids of Egypt. They predate writing in most parts of the world, and yet their builders left no inscriptions, no instructions, no names, only the stones remain. At first glance, they seem random, but look longer. Patterns emerge. Many of these circles align with the movements of the sun. Stonehenge, for example, is famously aligned with the summer solstice, sunrise, and winter solstice sunset. On those days, the sun rises or falls directly between specific stones, casting long, deliberate shadows. Elsewhere, other circles align with the moon, the stars, or particular landscape features, mountains, rivers, or valleys. These were not haphazard constructions. They required knowledge, effort, and generations of observation. But for what purpose? Were these ancient calendars, places of ritual, sites of burial, sacrifice, or seasonal gathering? We cannot say with certainty. Some believe the circles were ritual centers, where people gathered during key times of the year for feasting, ceremonies, or communal rites. Others suggest funerary purposes, especially since many are near long barrows, large burial mounds containing human remains. Excavations have revealed tools, animal bones, burned wood, and fragments of pottery, but no definitive answers. And yet the mystery is part of their power. Standing among them, you feel a kind of quiet reverence. These stones were dragged, lifted, and positioned by people with no wheels, no cranes, and no beasts of burden. Some weighed many tons and were hauled over miles of rough terrain. This effort, this devotion to placement and symmetry, suggests something sacred, something worth enduring blisters, broken fingers, and bruised backs. Perhaps these were sites where the dead and the living met, where the community marked time, remembered ancestors, and watched the sky in silent awe. One stone circle in Orkney, called the Ring of Brodgar, sits between two lochs, flanked by burial chambers and ancient dwellings. On solstice nights, the light lingers late over the water. Fires may once have flickered between the stones. Drums, chants, or silence. We do not know. Only that people returned year after year. Even today, visitors report a stillness, a hum, a sense of being watched or welcomed. It's not magic. It's memory, buried deep in stone. As you imagine the great circles, picture them not as ruins, but as living places filled with voices, firelight, and the shifting light of dawn. No names, no kings. Just the enduring mystery of a people who marked time not with clocks, but with the tilt of the earth and the patience of rock. Their rituals are gone, their songs are silent, but the stones remain. By now, you've walked through the dust and cold of prehistoric life. You've seen the worn hands of farmers, the lonely steps of a lost traveler, and the towering stones of forgotten ceremonies. But in this final stretch of the journey, we turn our gaze toward something else, not just survival, but status. Before castles, crowns, or coins, before rulers claimed divine right or gold-backed laws, power began in something far humbler: grain. Imagine a village by a slow river. The land is fertile. The crops, barley, wheat, perhaps millet, are good this year. And unlike in the more distant past, you're no longer simply foraging or wandering, you're storing. For the first time in human history, food can be kept, dried, sealed, measured, guarded, and with that grain comes leverage. You begin to see small signs of inequality. In earlier hunter-gatherer bands, most people had more or less the same: a shared kill, a shared camp. But now, some homes are larger. Some graves are richer. Some individuals begin to emerge with more livestock, better tools, or access to more land. These are not yet kings or lords, but they are leaders. Chiefs, perhaps. Chosen for their wisdom, their age, or simply their ability to protect and manage the village stores. With grain comes the need to organize labor, to coordinate planting, harvesting, irrigation. Decisions must be made, disputes settled. Slowly, gently, power concentrates. And once power begins to grow, it leaves traces. Archaeologists have found megalithic tombs from the Neolithic and early Bronze Age, far more elaborate than others nearby. Some are aligned with astronomical events. Others are hidden beneath massive mounds of earth. Inside are grave goods. Necklaces of rare shells, polished axes, finely woven cloth, beads of amber and jet.
Oh.
These were not common burials. These were people of distinction, buried with care, with ceremony, with a sense of lasting importance. One such example is the tomb at Newgrange in Ireland, a massive circular mound built around 3200 BCE. Older than Stonehenge or the Great Pyramids, its interior passageway aligns precisely with the rising sun on the winter solstice. For just a few minutes each year, light floods the inner chamber. Was this a burial site for a revered leader, a religious figure, a community founder? Can't be sure. The labor to build such a monument, without metal, without wheels, suggests someone held enough sway to command hundreds of hands. Not through money, not through armies, but perhaps through belief, tradition, or the simple power of stored food. These early chiefs did not sit on thrones, they wore no crowns. Their wealth was counted in grain bins, livestock, and ceremonial objects. They held sway in village meetings, oversaw rituals, and perhaps mediated between the living and the dead. But their rise marked a profound shift, the beginning of hierarchy, of leadership, of social roles that extended beyond the family or clan. From here would come kings, dynasties, empires, but once it was just a man with a surplus of grain, and others who depended on it. As you picture those early leaders, let go of the image of grandeur. Picture instead a man in a longhouse, seated by a fire, with others gathered to hear his counsel. Picture a stone tomb, built by dozens of hands, not for domination but for memory. Picture the slow dawn of civilization, not as a march, but as a quiet unfolding, from grain to governance, from storehouses to power. And now, we return, from the chill of early mornings in a smoke-filled hut, to the silent stillness of a man frozen in ice. From stone circles whispering lost rituals, to the quiet rise of power in the hands of those who stored grain. Prehistory has no written records, no journals, no grand proclamations carved in marble, only traces. A broken shard of pottery, a buried axe, a soot-stained hearthstone, a handprint in ochre on a cave wall. But in these small, enduring remnants, we glimpse lives, real, aching, ordinary lives, full of repetition, resilience, and rhythm. Theirs was a world without clocks, but it moved in time, with the seasons, with the sun, with the soft, steady pulse of the earth. Tonight, as you rest, think of those who came before you, not as distant or primitive, but as people like you. People who rose each day to tend the fire, carried burdens, shared meals, and listened to the wind, looked up at the same moon, and slowly, gently, laid the first stones of all we would become. Let your breath slow now. Let your thoughts drift. And if you sleep, let it be deep as the roots of the old forests, still as the chambers of ancient tombs, as soft as the earth that remembers everything. Good night. The story of light in the 18th century was not only about the people who made candles in workshops like these, but also about the strange, distant sources of that light. It's 1762, and you have just arrived in Charleston. You might hear the splash of water as sailors unload cargo off a ship, fresh from London. Among the cases and barrels are stacks of sheets of glass, fragile and clear as ice. These are not made by any glassblower local to this colony, but come directly from England, where skilled artisans use furnaces and molds to shape glowing globules of molten glass into plates perfect for letting the light shine through. How do they do it? That's the question that our young apprentice once answered. So we'll travel back to England to find out. And we will start by following the River Severn from its mouth, near Bristol, all the way to the Welsh border, where it joins the River Vyrnwy. We're looking for a town called Glaswyn, which means white or pure glass. And it's here where we will find what we're looking for. Inside the furnace room, two men work in the glow of a roaring furnace. Heat shimmers off their forearms and neck as they gather molten glass onto long metal hooks. One swings the hook forward, letting gravity pull the glass into a mold. He holds it there, turning it slowly so that the sides are coated evenly. Then he lifts it away, letting the excess drip back into the furnace and holding up a pane of glass, clear and smooth. And as our apprentice watches, fascinated, the other worker takes the second pane from the mold and drops it onto a table, letting the air cool it slowly. So how does this work? Well, the whole secret is in the furnace. Unlike glass-blown items where blowing air creates the shape, these flat panes are made by pouring the hot liquid glass into a mold. The furnace is fueled by a vast supply of coal dug from deep in the mines of South Wales, bringing heat to over 1,000 degrees. At this temperature, sand, potash, and limestone combine to make a special substance called flux. It's literally molten glass. The whole operation requires huge amounts of manpower. As our apprentice can see, some men feed the furnaces while others gather and shape the glass. Some are highly skilled craftsmen, while others are unskilled laborers. There are even women here, gathering glass onto the end of the metal hooks. Most of them are widows or unmarried women. Their job is simple, but dangerous. If a piece of glass breaks under their hands, the shards fly like knives. This factory has been built on the River Severn to take advantage of water power. The flowing river turns a water wheel, which provides the mechanical power needed to run the mill. Nearby, workers live in small houses, crowded and dark inside, yet each with a window to let the precious light shine through. Here in the furnace room, the temperature is almost unbearable. The air itself seems to shimmer and distort the view of the furnaces. Through the glass window of the cooling shed, our apprentice sees finished panes of glass stacked neatly ready to be shipped out to places like Charleston. But even here, the heat and grime of the workplace intrudes. Workers wipe sweat and grime from their faces, but it only makes them dirtier. As our apprentice looks around, he sees broken glass crunched underfoot, discarded scraps piled high. There's even glass in the river itself, floating in patches on the surface of the water. As the workday ends, our apprentice talks with one of the older glassmakers. He tells him about the work, the hours, the heat, and danger. But most of all, he talks about the incredible thing that he gets to make. The thing that lets light flood through windows, into homes, shops, offices, public buildings, and ships. Making glass isn't easy, but the results are worth it. In 1706, the first sheet glass factory opened near Bristol. Soon, however, competition would arise, thanks to a series of innovations made by one man, George Ravenscroft. In 1698, he experimented with adding more lead oxide to glass. This resulted in a purer, clearer product. In 1708, he opened his own factory in London and began producing plate glass, a term used for sheet glass produced this way. Unfortunately, this style of glassmaking was expensive. Each sheet required several skilled workers and tons of raw materials. Back in Charleston, as the sun sets, our apprentice lights candles to bring light to his master's counting house. Our master hangs heavy velvet curtains to keep the drafts out, but the glass windows allow the last of the daylight to illuminate piles of dried spices. Bolts of cloth in his desk piled high with ledgers. As our apprentice adds fuel to the candles, he thinks about the men who dug the coal to fuel the furnace, the workers who gathered the glass, and the artisans who cut and fitted the panes into the window frames. He thinks about the craftsmen who made the lanterns hanging from chains below the counter, which allowed sunlight to stream through the middle floor of the building, illuminating the goods sold here. All these things, the lanterns, the candles, and the windows, were made possible by fuel, and powered by the burning questions of an inquisitive apprentice. When the Chinese invented gunpowder, they did not intend it for war. In fact, it started out as a medicine. Its ingredients included sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. Sometimes they add flowers for color. Later, Europeans got hold of this recipe and made some interesting discoveries. They found that if the ingredients were combined and packed tightly in a small tube, it could burn rapidly. Because it burned so fast, people called it quick. The powder would ignite and explode outwards. People saw this as a way to add some bang to their Bacchus. It was incorporated into fireworks, first to produce spectacular effects, then later to scare the living daylights out of people. Fireworks became an integral part of celebrations and festivals. But it wasn't long before people realized that gunpowder could do more than illuminate the night sky. 17th century Europe had seen the rise of several new military powers. The Ottoman Empire and the various European colonial powers were all vying for dominance. To assert their influence, these nations needed ways to destroy their opponents and show off their power. Few weapons better projected force than artillery. Large cannons boomed and belched smoke, sending a clear message to any who heard them. So it's no surprise that by the mid-18th century, just about every country was trying to improve their artillery. While the basic formula of gunpowder had remained unchanged since its invention, gunsmiths were always experimenting with ways to improve its performance. Back in Charleston, one of our master's friends has recently acquired a shipment of cannon shot from England. While they may look like simple balls, they are carefully designed and engineered items used to fire the deadly charge of gunpowder. These cannonballs aren't just round for show. Shape allows them to cut through the air and strike targets accurately and with great force. They're often smooth, polished even to reduce friction as they leave the barrel of the gun. But sometimes our master's friend uses the cannon for something else, for fireworks. During festivals and holidays, the dull roar of cannon fire gives way to bright flashes and showers of sparks as the cannon is loaded with colored powders. From the bustling streets of Charleston to the shores of a quiet lake in upstate New York, it's summertime, 1776, and everyone's celebrating American independence. As the sun sinks behind the hills, casting long shadows on the happy crowd, you turn to light a candle to help chase away the gloom. As the sun sinks, darkness falls across the colonies. For some, the night is filled with celebration. Air buzzes with the delight of dancing, drinking, and revelry. Tonight, Americans celebrate their independence with bonfires and fireworks. In Boston, crowds have gathered. People cheer, sing, and shout, throwing lighted candles into the air. Each flicker of flame reflects the growing spirit of freedom. Down south in Charleston, the festivities are no less enthusiastic. Bonfires crackle and flare along the beach, sending sparks soaring toward the darkening sky. The glow of liberty illuminates happy faces turned toward the flames. Even in rural areas, celebrations are taking place. Families and neighbors gather. The youngest hold glowing embers aloft, laughing and cheering. A spirit of unity pervades the countryside. In small towns, big cities, and everywhere in between, the night is alive with celebration. Meanwhile, in a faraway land, the king's officers prepare for battle. Across the ocean, life goes on, as usual. Soldiers drill, cannon fire and swords are sharpened. Everything is ready for the coming fight. But tonight, in this corner of the world, the atmosphere is festive. As the celebrations continue into the night, people across the colonies enjoy the flickering light of freedom. And there you have it, another story of the 18th century brought to life by the flickering glow of candlelight. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more historical tales. And if you want to see more stories of the 18th century, check out the links below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. In 1834, a new arrival came to the bustling port city of Boston. He was young, ambitious, and hoping to build a fortune in America. But unlike many immigrants who came toiling ashore seeking a better life, this man brought light with him. In fact, he brought more light than anyone else ever had. His name was Michael Faraday, and he changed the world by inventing the first electric light bulb. That invention was almost 2 centuries ago. Today, we hardly think about electricity. The flick of a switch, we banish darkness from our homes and illuminate them in all colors of the rainbow. In the blink of an eye, we can light up cities that never sleep. Even in the middle of nowhere, we carry glowing rectangles in our pockets and transparent screens in our hands. Electricity is everywhere, so it's easy to forget how new it really is. But let us put ourselves in the place of those early Bostonians who knew only flickering candlelight and smoky oil lamps. Imagine their astonishment at seeing a brilliant white light emanating from a glass bulb. What did it look like? How did it change their lives? Let's imagine. Long before Michael Faraday and his electric light bulb, long before gas lamps adorned the streets of Boston or even Europe, one of the brightest, cleanest burning candles in the world came from the sea. The source was not a plant. It was not a mineral. It was a creature, the sperm whale. The whale's massive head contained a waxy oil called spermaceti. It burned with a clear, bright flame and produced far less smoke than tallow, the rendered fat of oxen and sheep. Spermatheca was precious and expensive. Only the wealthy could afford to fill their homes with its light. To gather it, ships left New England's ports for voyages that could last years. They sailed into cold, remote waters, where crews endured storms, cramped quarters, and the dangerous hunt itself. When a whale was spotted, small boats were lowered, and men rowed toward the towering animal, harpoons ready. Once struck, the whale could drag the boat for miles in what sailors called a Nantucket sleigh ride. Only when it finally tired or surfaced for the last time would the crew haul it alongside the ship. The process of cutting in, stripping the blubber, and extracting the oil was messy, exhausting, and perilous. The oil was stored in casks, then taken home to be refined into the pure white wax used for the finest candles. In Boston's wealthiest homes, these spermaceti candles burned in polished brass holders, casting a steady glow over parlors and dining rooms. They were a mark of refinement, a way to keep the dark at bay without the smoke and odor of tallow. 1830s Boston was a city of gaslights. Most streets were still unpaved, muddy tracks rutted deep by carts and carriages. But along the main thoroughfares, sturdy lampposts held hissing, sputtering gas lamps that threw a sickly yellow light on the brick and stone storefronts. Most folks couldn't afford to live near these glowing street lamps. Their own homes were lit by candles or oil lamps. Only the wealthy elite enjoyed the glow of gaslight in their windows and the comforting hiss of flames in their halls. It was in one of these upscale homes that young Michael Faraday might have seen the first incandescent light bulb. He recorded that wonder in his journal, writing of a strange, luminous body suspended in air, radiating heat and light. This was no ordinary flame. Whatever magic was inside that bulb defied explanation, both terrifying and mesmerizing. For a scientist like Faraday, the desire to understand such a phenomenon was irresistible. Faraday wasn't the only one captivated by the idea of a radically new kind of illumination. Just a few years earlier, a handful of friends gathered in a downtown Boston basement. There, amid the clutter of their workshop, they started an electrical experiments club. Among them was a young man named Samuel Morse. Like Faraday, he marveled at the potential of electricity to change the world. Morse believed that lightning was simply the spark of something greater, a force that could bring light to every corner of society, literally electrifying the darkness. The experiments of Faraday and his fellow scientists gave Morse confidence that he, too, could master electricity. He began devising ways to control it, harnessing its wild energy into something useful. After years of toil, Morse achieved his breakthrough. On May 1844, he sent the first telegraph message from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland. "What hath God wrought?" The message flashed from one city to the next in an instant, proving that electricity could bridge the gaps of distance and darkness. And though Morse was best known for his telegraph, his vision for harnessing electricity went even further. Morse imagined a world illuminated by electric lights, freed from the smoke and soot of oil lamps and candles. As he wrote to a friend, "If I could send light as I do my telegraphs, there would be no occasion for such things as candles, oil lamps, etc. The whole earth would be lighted up as if by the reflection of the sun." Morse saw electric light as a boon for everyone, a chance to wipe out the darkness and illuminate all of humanity. But like so many inventors before and after him, he found that reality didn't always match his dreams. Faraday's electric light, which he demonstrated in 1835, was indeed captivating. In the dim glow of candlelight, he placed a platinum wire into an electric circuit. Suddenly, the wire glowed brightly, emitting enough light to illuminate the entire room. Other scientists had created sparks before, but Faraday's light was different. It was steady, clear, and astonishingly bright. At first, the wire glowed red hot, then yellow, then white, like a miniature sun suspended in the darkness. When Faraday showed his invention to the Royal Institute in London, spectators gasped. Some thought it was the devil's work. Others were convinced it spelled the end of daylight. Despite the excitement around his invention, Faraday remained humble. He recognized that the light from his wire was faint compared to the sun, and that producing enough electricity to power millions of glowing wires would be a monumental challenge. But Faraday also knew that his invention would change the world. In his journal he wrote, I do not think I shall ever know what it is, or how it is produced, but I feel assured that it will be one of the most important discoveries that has yet been made. Even if he himself would not profit from the invention, Faraday was content knowing that the light he discovered could banish darkness forever. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, Samuel Morse continued tinkering in his basement workshop. In 1836, Morse succeeded in creating a simple electric motor. Then in 1840, he built the first telegraph in America. Morse's inventions attracted the attention of the federal government. Soon he was summoned to Washington, D.C., to demonstrate his telegraph for officials. But Morse had bigger ambitions than the military applications the politicians envisioned. He dreamed of a communication system that spanned the continent, connecting people from Maine to Oregon. While demonstrating his invention, Morse showed that he could send messages across 20 miles of wire. Impressed, the government agreed to fund a telegraph line between Washington and Philadelphia. Morse recruited a young colleague named Alfred Vail to help install the wires. Vail would go on to design the sounder and keyer that made the telegraph practical for everyday use. Together, Morse and Vail showed the nation what electricity could do. Then in 1849, a gold rush transformed everything. Thousands of Americans flocked to California in search of riches. Seeing the potential in this vast new settlement, Morse and Vail rushed to install a telegraph line there. It took 3 years, but in 1851, the first transcontinental telegraph line was complete. From Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, people could now communicate instantly over 3,000 miles away, no matter how dark it might be. A simple click of the key could illuminate the darkness with words. And just as Morse and Vail strung telegraph lines across the country, another kind of light crossed the ocean. In 1878, Thomas Edison opened his laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey, to unveil the first commercially practical incandescent light bulb. After years of perfecting his design, he installed the first arc lighting system in Wall Street, New York City. The streets shone with electric light. Finally, Morse's dream of illuminating the world seemed within reach. So when Michael Faraday arrived in Boston, the city was already embracing electric light. Gas lamps illuminated the streets, wealthy Bostonians enjoyed candles in their homes, and Morse's telegraph wires spanned the country. In the coming decades, electric light would transform Boston and the rest of the world. But Faraday's greatest gift was showing humanity that electricity could bring light into the darkness at all. As the last candle burns low, the room cools and the shadows return. The day's work, whether dipping wicks, hammering silver, or braving the sea, is over. The city settles into its night, awaiting the first glow of morning, when the cycle will begin again. Thanks for watching. If you like this episode, be sure to check out others on our channel. We have lots of fascinating stories from history's past.
Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.